It was not spell-like compulsion. So there is no voodoo involved in this. She's not been hoaxed or anything. Um, it's only a curious passivity. But here we get further information. Mrs. Miller dropped the box and stood trembling, trying to catch her breath. Well, this may be a result of carrying a box, but if a thin and fragilely constructed girl like Miriam can carry this box, then sure, Mrs. Miller can carry this box. And when here, the narrator tells us she stood trembling, trying to catch her breath, it is probably not physical exhaustion. It is probably psychological stress. Okay. Well, and now Miriam reveals her motivation for meeting Mrs. Miller and coming back time and again. Because I've come to live with you. But you can't go away and leave me alone. Uh-huh. And then the last place I lived was with an old man. He was terribly poor and we never had good things to eat. But I think I'll be happy here. Miriam is not saying I'll be happy with you. She's just saying, but I think I'll be happy here. And this is a difference. Please be aware of such minute differences. Mrs. Miller's face dissolved into a mask of ugly red lines. Carefully, she edged backward until she touched the door. She pounded frantically on the door of the first apartment she came to. Of the first apartment she came to. Okay, so here she turns to some neighbor, the first apartment that she came to. Anyone, right? She doesn't have anyone she can turn to. And thus she knocks on the door, or here it says pounded frantically in the door of the first apartment she came to. Okay, and now she says, I'm afraid of her. And we also get more information because now she tells us why she is so terribly afraid. She won't leave, and I can't make her. That is probably the reason. If she could make her, there would be no need to be so terrified by the girl. But she can't make her. She doesn't have the energy. She doesn't have the power to make the girl leave, and therefore, um, she has no strategy. She is absolutely helpless and feels impotent, so to say. And now Her thoughts go wild. She's going to do something terrible. She's already stolen my cameo, which was true. But she's about to do something worse, something terrible. Okay? So her imagination runs wild. And her imagination, which is absolutely out of control, now terrifies her so much that she, well, I don't know. Yes, she is terrified. She's absolutely terrified. No more than that. Terrified, and she has absolutely no power. She now needs a complete stranger to help her deal with the situation. All right, so the neighbor goes to her apartment, checks the apartment out, and then she goes back. Then she relaxes a little in her neighbor's place, apartment. And when she is talking to her neighbor, she says, I don't want to see her again. I don't want to be anywhere near her. So this is terror. This is an expression of terror. I don't want to see her. I don't want to be anywhere near her. I can't bear that person, meaning the little girl. Okay? Okay. So, Mrs. Miller goes back to her apartment. And all of a sudden, she becomes aware of, where is it? Okay. Well, I thought, here it is. You see, here. This was an empty room, emptier than if the furnishings and familiars were not present, lifeless and petrified as a funeral parlor. So it is not her home anymore. It is her apartment. She's been living there for nobody knows how long, but she must have been living there for a long, long time. And therefore, she should have the feeling that this is her home, where she is at home, like an animal has a nest, right? But no, all of a sudden, this was an empty room, emptier than if the furnishings and familiars were not present, lifeless and petrified as a funeral parlor. So just imagine what the events must have done to Mrs. Miller's soul. Okay? And then, as though moving in a dream, she sank to a chair. Yes, the dream is her nightmare. She is going through a nightmare. This is not a nightmare that she's having at night, but this is a nightmare she's living through. Okay? And then the narrator tells us something. In times of terror or immense distress. And he follows this train of thought. There are moments when the mind waits as though for a revelation, etc., etc., etc. But here we get a classification of what Mrs. Miller is going through, because the narrator is uses the words here, terror or immense distress. Yes. Here, distress probably has the same meaning as stress. She is under immense stress or distress. Okay. And the consequence is also a process is mentioned here. Look here. The only thing she had lost to Miriam was her identity. But now she knew she had found again the person who lived in this room, who cooked her own meal. So when she has worked her way through this crisis, this terror, this feeling of this is not my home, this is a funeral power, this is lifeless, when she has coped with this, all of a sudden she begins to realize, no, I'm still me. I am still the person who lives in this, who cooked her own meals, who owned a canary, who was someone she could trust and believe in, Mrs. H.T. Miller. And another piece of interesting information, her mood changes, listening in contentment. She's no longer she's no longer terrified. She is no longer unhappy. Now she is at peace with herself. And look at the very, very last sentence. No, penultimate sentence. Mrs. Miller stiffened. Now, when you become stiff, there is a kind of tension in your body. And there is a certain energy and power in your body. So she has gone through a terrible crisis. When she thought she had to surrender and succumb to this little girl. Succumb means to give herself up, to give away her identity and her personality. But no, she lived through this in order to find her identity again and found the person again. And here, when she hears the sound of another person being present, Mrs. Miller stiffened. So, when we come to talk about the ending and how the story may run on, let's not forget that there is a change of mind and also a change of psychological power. So now we have to make a draft before we start writing the, out, the outline, I'm sorry. And when we go back to the text, then we can, all we need to do is collect the points that we found so far. Okay, so it all starts out cheerfully when Mrs. Miller meets Miriam outside a movie theater. Don't let my American spelling puzzle you. That's all I can and all I know. All right? So, it all starts out cheerfully when Mrs. Miller meets Miriam outside a movie theater. But when she hears Miriam talk to her, there is a shift in atmosphere, a change in atmosphere, a shift in atmosphere, and for the first time, Mrs. Miller starts feeling uncomfortable. So, second point. But even in the first minutes of their first encounter, Mrs. Miller experiences or undergoes a change of atmosphere when she becomes aware or realizes how Miriam is talking to her. Okay? I don't know whether this needs be in bold print. I think this can be in just regular print. Okay, so here we are again. We proceed. Now we proceed to the second meeting. And what can we write down? Mrs. Miller increasingly loses control as Miriam takes control of the situation and intrudes upon Mrs. Miller's privacy, which is her apartment. Okay, so shall we take that down? When Miriam comes to visit Mrs. Miller for the second time, Mrs. Miller loses, I said increasingly loses control of the situation as Miriam takes control right? I think that is all we need to say at this point. And we go back. We could add here that Mrs. Miller is lost for words. This shows in Mrs. Miller's reaction when she is lost for words, when she needs to smoke. Oops. What kind of spelling is that? Smoke a cigarette to steady herself when she needs to lean against a door frame because there. No, we'll, you know what? I think we leave this for the analysis. We don't include this here. No, we don't. Don't. This is an outline and not an analysis. We don't do this here. Loses control of the situation as Miriam takes control. When Miriam eventually, let's say eventually, this is a beautiful adverb here, eventually leaves Mrs. Miller's apartment. Mrs. Miller has to spend a day in bed as a consequence of a nervous breakdown. Okay, so outline. We just want an outline, no more than that. So we don't get lost in all the details because we can leave the details for another category of assignment. Okay. So we move on to the third meeting here. And maybe this is exactly the crucial scene when she's turning to her neighbor and says, "She is scaring me. The girl is scaring me," or "I am afraid of that girl." Okay? So, when Miriam returns 2 days later, on a Tuesday, let's say on a Tuesday, on a Tuesday, on a Tuesday. And declares she wants to move in with Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Miller seeks help from the nearest neighbor available. She admits that she is afraid of the girl and fears that the girl is going to do terrible things. So, again, Mrs. Miller goes through a severe psychological crisis until she finds herself, not herself, but herself again and regains strength and energy to deal with the girl. Full stop. That's it. Long video. I know this is a long video. I'm sorry. I apologize to you. Well, this was a process of how I would approach such an assignment and how I would go about it. Maybe it helps you. If it does, it will be no waste of time watching this. If this does not convince you, well, then it's going to be a waste of time for you, and then you should stop somewhere in halfway through it and stop seeing this. Okay? Well, I stop here. Take care of yourself, stay safe, and we see each other in one of the next videos. Bye-bye.